let's get to Iran for a bit for the last few questions. Non-proliferation treaty. Well, let's start here. The E3 states. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was said that Iran agreed with the 6-month plan that France put out. It agreed to work with the IAEA, meaning it agreed to all of the provisions that those states put out, and they still put the snapback sanctions in. And Iran is like, are you serious right now? Like, we agreed with your provisions, and you still implemented the sanctions. So Iran has come out and effectively said, all right, we're no longer going to work with the IAEA. Thank you for that. There's questions about the non-proliferation treaty, whether or not they're going to continue and just pull out of that. And there was a huge, let's say, group of congressmen that were pushing to get rid of the fatwa against nukes, effectively making the argument, look, we can have the fatwa against using nukes, but we should have them for security reasons. At first, did I get all that correct? And two, step into it for me. Give me your take on what's occurring right now in Iran over this.
Yes, in general, you have it correct. What I would say is that, remember, we had this discussion earlier about Iran negotiating indirectly with the United States, and I said that the Iranians knew that the Israelis and the Americans were plotting an attack.
Yes.
But the reason, first the Iranians refused to negotiate, and then the Americans changed their tone. And then the Iranians forced indirect negotiations, and they said that we'll negotiate indirectly in Oman. And the Americans didn't want this, but they accepted. So, but the Iranians knew that this was not going to end in an agreement. And the Iranians knew a couple of weeks, well, I don't know exactly when, but before the attack took place, the Iranians knew there was going to be an attack.
Right.
And even I knew. So, but the reason why the Iranians negotiated was because they wanted to both inform ordinary Iranians and people across the world in the global south that, look, we tried. They can't accuse us of, ignoring a possible solution through negotiations, because that's what they will do. They'll go and say, those, and their Persian media, they have a host of Persian media, these Western intelligence agencies, really sinister people in this Iran International, Manoto, I don't know, BBC Persian, this huge network, and all sorts of websites and Telegram channels and cyber armies, thousands of people in Albania who used to be terrorists who fought for Saddam Hussein against their own country in the 1980s. They're in Albania now. Yeah. They work day and night. Each of them have tens of accounts in Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and what's it called, and Twitter or X. So the Iranians, in order to make sure that ordinary Iranians recognize that we tried, and for others to understand, they went through the motions. And it worked well for Iran. In this case, it's the same. Mm-hmm. When the Iranians negotiated in Egypt, I was saying to friends, and I think on different programs, that the snapback is going to happen. And I think it's pretty clear that it is going to happen.
Yes.
So why did Iran negotiate? Well, Iran, I mean, we should not get distracted by people online from different camps in Iran who are liberal or I don't know, or hardliners or whatever they're called. There are many camps in Iran. There are many different views. But the state itself, they negotiated for the same reasons that they negotiated indirectly with the Americans a few months ago. Because they wanted to show ordinary Iranians that, look, if there's escalation,
it's not us.
We tried.
Yeah.
They want to tell their friends in Moscow, in Beijing, and in the capitals of BRICS countries and Shanghai Cooperation Organization countries in the region, and their massive following, because Iran is now very popular. People across the world are looking to Iran for as their hope
We are.
and the axis of resistance.
We are.
So they wanted to show everyone that, look, we are not the ones who are the trouble, who are causing trouble. The Iranians knew that the French were going to, that they were lying. They knew it. They knew that the British and the Germans were lying. They knew their diplomats had no intention whatsoever to implement a deal. What they were hoping was that Iran would not agree, so that when they carried out the snapback, they could say, well, the Iranians refused to negotiate. But the Iranians outsmarted them. And they said, okay, we're ready.
Yeah.
And then they were stuck because their diplomats are monsters. These are the same people who've been justifying, just like their journalists are monsters. Legacy media journalists. For 2 years, they've been, justifying a Holocaust in Gaza. These are the same people. They didn't come from the moon. These are the same people who've been doing everything they can to help the Israeli regime for the last 2 years. Even when they now, some of them, not all of them, have come out to say, we recognize Palestine. They're not doing it because they love Palestinians. They couldn't care less for Palestinians. If the Israelis slaughter, Netanyahu today said there's no hunger in Gaza, and he said we're not killing civilians, and
he's a habitual
these
liar.
people,
Yes.
these people are no different than Netanyahu. He's just more crude. He's more, he's just there. As I said, it's like there's no difference between the person who enables torture and the torturer. It's no difference. The American official who sends someone to be tortured in some dungeon in some country, he's a torturer too. He's no better than the torturer. They're the same. So these politicians, these diplomats, these Western journalists, they're all like that. They're all, they do what their Zionist overlords want them to do. They're not going to do anything different. So when they accept Palestine, they're only doing it because people have woken up.
Mm-hmm.
They want to silence their people because the outrage across England and the UK and France and Germany and the United States and South Korea and Japan and Australia is growing. So they have to do something to appease the protesters, those who are angry.
Agreed.
So this is just an empty gesture. Nothing.
Agreed.
There's not going to be a Palestine because of their statements. Although this is a good sign, it shows that they're on the back foot. It shows that they're in trouble. It shows that the resistance, the global resistance, the popular sentiments in support of the Palestinian people against the Holocaust, that they're having an impact. That these regimes are having to take even token steps is still important. So the Iranians knew that the French were lying. They knew that the Germans and the British were lying. They knew this was just these negotiations were fake, so that then when they pull out, they can blame the Iranians. But a ruse. But what happened was that the Iranians outsmarted them. Just as the Iranians outsmarted the Americans over the negotiations, the Iranians knew that the Israeli regime would strike. The Iranians did not know that they're going to strike the leadership.
Right.
That was a major miscalculation. It was a failure on the day one of the war. Was a failure, no doubt about that. But they knew that there was going to be attack. But they thought it would be like the previous attack where they bombed anti-aircraft sites, and they thought that they'd do that again and probably bomb the nuclear program. But they didn't think that they were trying to they'd go after a regime change, because that would be a whole new situation. But ultimately, the Iranians hit back, and the Israelis, they lost the war. There's no doubt that the Israeli regime lost the war. But the reason for these negotiations and these agreements was because the Iranians knew what was happening. They knew what these people were trying to do. And just, for example, I've just had, I meet people, like relatives, friends, colleagues at university. There are people who always have questions, because they're watching these Persian media outlets and they're saying, well, why didn't Iran do this, or why didn't Iran do that? Even though they know that the American regime is sinister, the Israeli regime is sinister. But these people, these Persian media outlets are constantly raising these questions. So what the government did, what the state did, I think was very, very smart.
Yeah,
And that they, basically showed to everyone that, look, we tried.
agree.
We tried. It isn't our fault. And that makes internal unity stronger, and it creates greater global sympathy.
It also makes it clear that you can't negotiate with monsters. It makes it very clear to the domestic population. Look, we tried to negotiate with them.
Oh
They,
yes. Oh yes.
clearly weren't being honest,
Absolutely.
just like they weren't being honest in the previous negotiations. Like it builds a sentiment within the context of the public itself.
Jamal, absolutely. I have university students and former university students who've been contacting me since the 12-day war. And so many people's views have changed.
Mm-hmm.
Some young people apologize and say, I was always against you and I hated you, or I thought you were talking nonsense. And now this is how it's done.
Yeah.
You have, the state has behaved in a way where they've been exposed. The Americans, the Israel. And it's not just Trump. I think we went over this once. When the 12-day war started, CNN hates Trump. They started talking about, I saw a clip of Iranian sleeper cells in the United States.
Yes. Yes. That's the way,
Right?
that's the way every works.
These woke monsters, these woke beasts who speak about 1,001 genders, they were intentionally demonizing Iranian Americans, many of whom never been to Iran. Many of them who'd married non-Iranians, who'd never been to, many had never been to Iran, many had never been to Iran since childhood.
Mm-hmm.
They have nothing to do with Iran. But they demonized them and said these people are all dangerous. Why? Because they wanted to strengthen the case for war against Iran. So they were in bed because they're all, this Zionist force. You saw what Tucker Carlson said, and we all knew it. He didn't have to, we all knew that the Zionists are in charge. It's not even Netanyahu. It's the Zionists who are in charge. But we all know that whether they're Democrats or Republicans, their overlords are Zionists. So when Trump attacks Iran, CNN is going to play the same role as Fox News, but in its own way, and using its own language,
Yes.
being more, more subtle, less bombastic, and all that. So they spoke about these Iranian sleeper cells. Well, where are these sleeper cells? Why did they carry out any terrorist attacks? Because they knew they were lying. But next time around, they'll say the same thing all over again. Talk about sleeper cells and all that to create fear among ordinary Americans to help support any attack on Iran. The next time the Israeli regime attacks Iran, watch how the Western media justifies.
They're going to do.
They'll do whatever they can to make it seem legitimate.
They will do the same thing. I'm curious whether or not the politicians and I guess there are two questions with this. One, do you have the same sense that they're using the non-proliferation treaty, the not working with the IAEA, as a pretext to create some kind of fake justification for an attack? I had Colonel Wilkerson on the show. Colonel Wilkerson made the point of saying there will be an attack before Thanksgiving, meaning in his mind, they are gearing up for this in order to do this. I've heard other people who say, well, they clearly don't have, let's say, the air superiority, or the very least the capabilities, meaning they know that their capabilities are very diminished just because of the first 12-day war. Why would they do this again? Give me your take on this. How is Iran thinking about this? And just to piggyback on this, Iran released documentation about the nuclear facilities. They released about IAEA Grossi being spied on by the Israelis. I think it was 3 videos that they released. I interpreted that as this kind of, well, first, let's answer the first question first before I bring this into it.
So what was the first question?
I'm sorry. That was my fault. I was thinking too much. In the way that you said that they knew that they were going to be attacked, in the first 12-day war. Do they have that sense now? Are they thinking something very similar to the first 12-day war, where either Israel or the US or both are gearing up for some sort of attack using, let's say, the Non-Proliferation Treaty or the IAEA pullout as a fake justification
Right.
for that attack?
Well, first of all, if our nuclear program has been obliterated, as Trump keeps
According to Trump.
saying,
Right.
then why would they want to bomb Iran? There's no justification. But you'll see whenever they do attack, you'll see the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, all of them, the BBC, Sky News, The Guardian, quote, unnamed intelligence officials saying that, there's, how it works.
Yeah.
And so they'll justify it, and then we'll have the sleeper cells, and we'll have everything. We'll have all the propaganda necessary to justify war, and you will have foolish people who will believe it. But I agree with something that you said a minute ago, and that is that the Israeli regime does not have the upper hand. They lost the war. I mean, it's clear as day. Steve Bannon is no ordinary person. Steve Bannon knows what's going on behind closed doors. When he says that Trump saved Netanyahu during those last 3 days of war, 2, 3, 4 days, I don't remember exactly what he said, the Iranians were hammering them, and he saved Netanyahu. He knows what he's talking about. So and now the Iranians obviously are in a better position than they were back then, because Iran was not going to be caught off guard like last time. Iran has seen its weaknesses. They're working to make sure that they don't have the weaknesses that they had last time. They see their strengths. They'll try to improve those.
Mm-hmm.
So Iran and the Israelis gave it their best shot. So the Iranians are obviously going to hit them back harder next time around. So it may seem foolish to you and me for them to carry out an attack, but these people are not rational actors. You saw Netanyahu just speak, I don't know, in front of the UN. These are crazy people.
Yes,
these are mad people. I mean, all genocide, all Zionists are crazy, and they're sick, they're mad. These supporters of genocide, when you watch their speeches and their gatherings and the way in which they justify what they do, they're not normal. So don't expect rational thinking and rational behavior from these people.
I know.
If they were rational, we would not, we would not have over. Well, I know I'm speaking to your audience. We wouldn't have well over, and I know your audience is politically aware, and so I'm basically speaking to
It's myself. Fine. No, it's fine. It's fine.
So for well over 2 decades, we wouldn't have this.
Yeah,
we wouldn't have these endless wars, and the United States just going downhill. And now, I mean, I'm no fan of Charlie Kirk. He said many ugly things, and but it's it's clear as day so far, unless the FBI releases a footage that they are that they're holding back to show otherwise. It's clear that the official story is bogus, and if that what is it that was on his chest? If it is true that he was killed by that what is it, a mic or what? I don't know. You call it the I don't know.
You sniper rifle.
Sorry,
the sniper.
Sorry,
Kirk getting killed.
Well, you know that now they're saying that, I don't know if you saw what you've seen over the last few hours, but they're talking about the mic on his shirt. These new mics that they have, which have magnets. You put it on; they're wireless, and they say, some are saying that this exploded. Anyway, and the argument, the footage that they show is a bit is strange. I mean. Whatever the facts are, the official story is bogus unless they start showing footage to show that they're not lying. But the point that I'm making is that if it is true that they killed Charlie Kirk, you know, the that it was not just some kid, some crazy kid with,
Yeah.
uh, if that's true, it just shows how it's just I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised because these people are not rational actors. They pretend that they are rational, but that facade is gone. The mask has been removed for the last couple of decades, or more than the last 2 decades.
It
And
sounds
so
like you're saying you
uh,
expect an attack.
it, I cannot say for certain that an attack will happen, but the assumption in
Is that
Iran,
it is.
the what do you what they are working based on the belief that it will happen.
Okay.
No one can say it will happen
Yes.
for sure, but the belief. So they're rebuilding and restructuring and strengthening uh, both military capabilities, but also civil society, because we know that these Zionists that they have no problem with slaughtering women and children.
No, they do not.
So
They do
so
not.
protecting senior officials, protecting their families. This is something that is, you know, more. There's more focus, but there's always going to be there's when they hit, they're going to hit. I mean, last time around, I recall people they asked me to get rid of my phone, and if I done that, I couldn't do interviews. I'm using my phone right now.
Yeah.
Um, so if it happens again, I will have to use my
Yeah, I
phone,
was deeply concerned.
regardless of whether I'm a target or not. So there's just some things that will or will not happen, but Iran will be stronger next time around than and more prepared than last time.
Last question. Talking to Colonel Wilkerson recounts that Donald Trump had a conversation with Netanyahu, and Netanyahu says, "Well, I'm going to use nukes," because, as you pointed out, they were getting battered, and they were running out of air defense, and apparently they were shocked and surprised that Iranian missiles could hit them. Meaning, they went into this thinking we're not going to get hit, and we're not going to take a beating, and they took the worst beating of their existence, and they were shocked by the whole thing. When it became clear that we can't extricate ourselves from the war, we're not prepared for a longer war, we need help, in which case Donald Trump gets involved. But the way the conversation goes, Netanyahu with Trump says, in which Trump says, don't do that, I'll settle this and I'll get you. That is always going to be the end question within the context of any kind of war with Israel. What's the thought of that? If Israel uses a nuke, let's say Iran pummels Israel, and Netanyahu, who I firmly believe is perfectly willing to fire off a nuke, what happens after that? And everybody that I've talked to has no answer for that. Like, you have military, hard-nosed military guys that have been in the military for like 30 years. They're like, I have no idea what happens after that. From the Iranian point of view, what's the thought process in that?
Okay, John, here I'm going to say some things which are a bit different from what I usually say.
Please.
But let me be very blunt to your viewers. Ayatollah Khamenei is a unique person. He's very unique. He is utterly moral, and he's very principled. Just like Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. I was in Beirut when he was martyred last year. I was a few hundred meters away from it. It was, those days were among the most painful days of my life, because I loved that man immensely, and so did Lebanese. I mean, those who were principled, not those who were factional and funded by Westerners, or funded by people who were funded by the West. Well, anyone who had any decency, had great respect for Nasrallah. Why? Because he was a man of principle. And let me put it this way. We cannot support anything immoral when, for example, why do we support the Palestinian people? We cannot be indifferent. Why do we support the Palestinian people? Because there's a genocide going on.
Right.
And before that, it was because they were being ethnically cleansed. In principle, we have to support them, just like we supported the resistance in South Africa, just like how we support the Venezuelans or the Cubans. The Cubans are not, it's a communist party which has traditionally been hostile towards religion, any religion. But for us, it's the principle that there's a oppressive regime, the United States, I think it's a small country.
Mm-hmm.
So these are principles. Now, some, they say in politics, there are no principles. For him, that's not the case. For Nasrallah, that was not the case. And tomorrow is his anniversary the anniversary of his martyrdom.
Yes.
For Ayatollah Khamenei, that's the case. Now, they can say he's an evil monster. He kills his own people. I don't care. I mean, that's the same Western media that's been supporting the genocide for the last 2 years.
Yes.
So anyone who believes anything that they say, I'm not even trying to convince that person. I don't really care what that person thinks, because that person has decided to think otherwise. He is extraordinarily principled, Ayatollah Khamenei. And when he says that, and Iran has never, the Americans have said in American intelligence agencies that after 2003, Iran stopped building a nuclear weapon. No, Iran was never working to build a nuclear weapon. Never did the state make a decision to build a nuclear weapon at any point, and there's no evidence for that. And as I told you once before, or maybe more than once before, during the Iran-Iraq war, when the West was giving Saddam Hussein chemical weapons to use, people went to the leader at that time, Imam Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini, and said, look, we need to make chemical weapons. And he said, no.
Right.
And the West, by the way, was not only giving Saddam chemical weapons, but they were blockading Iran, trying to prevent Iran from purchasing gas masks.
Mm-hmm.
I think I told you, maybe you once, that my gas mask was North Korean. Anyway, so when Ayatollah Khamenei says no nuclear weapons, he says it out of principle, that this is a horrible weapon that targets ordinary people. But also there are other reasons for it, because if Iran gets a weapon, then everyone in the region would want a weapon. And a lot of these regimes are unstable. The Republic of Azerbaijan is run by a family dictatorship. And Aliyev, he used to gamble and lose all his money. And there was a time when Iran funded him, to keep that country stable. You have the Persian Gulf. You have all sorts of countries in this region which are not inherently stable. The Emirates is not inherently stable. It's a family dictatorship with millions of slaves and indentured servants. How could you call that stable? It's stable today, but that doesn't mean it'll be stable tomorrow. So having a nuclear weapon has many negative consequences, potentially. However, Dr. Larijani, who is now the head of the Supreme National Security Council, last year he wasn't the head of he wasn't the chair of the chair of the council, which is basically the head of the council in the absence of the president. Before this, he said once on TV, but he was an advisor to the leader. He said on television that if there's an existential, I'm paraphrasing, if there's an existential threat to Iran, Iran's nuclear posture will change.
Okay.
Dr. Kharozi said this twice too. He is another former foreign minister and an advisor to the leader. He said it twice before Dr. Larijani said this. These are not, Dr. Kharozi, when he spoke, since he said this twice on two different occasions, it's clear that he had authorization to say that.
Right.
Someone gave him the authorization to say it when he said it twice.
Oh, I see.
And right? So today, Iran's military capabilities are clear. Iran's missile program and drone program is probably the third best in the world. Perhaps in some ways, possibly second. But Russia, China, and then probably Iran. And of course, Iran has other capabilities too, but Iran is one of the 10 countries whose nuclear technologically is very developed in the nuclear field. Iran has many scientists. I mean, they can murder scientists. Actually, the day before yesterday, a student at my university, at my faculty, she said that her father owns a couple of apartments in a building, and they hit that building and murdered a family. Apparently, the Israelis were targeting that family, so they just an individual, so they just murdered the whole family and wrecked the building that that her father was owned part of. That's just how these Israelis are. That's how these Zionists are. They don't care. They don't care about human life. So, but going back to, Iran has nuclear capabilities, and now Iran is at the least that it's going to do is going to fully suspend cooperation with the IAEA, and so that makes it very difficult for the Americans to assess where Iran is. I have no doubt that Iran is not going to develop a nuclear weapon. But
really,
I don't believe that Iran has the intention, because that's what the leader says. And when he says he means it. That's who he is.
Okay, I see.
Just like Nasrallah, just saying Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was a person that was another unique person. These are people who they will be, the reality of their personalities will be discovered in the years ahead. But in any case, I have no doubt that Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon.
I see.
But Iran's capability to shift policy in a meaningful way is there.
I see.
And Iran's capabilities are so immense that it can be done very easily. It's not difficult for Iran. So the Israeli regime has no advantage. But what it does show is how barbaric the regime is, and how barbaric the Europeans are, and how barbaric the Canadians and the regimes and the elites are. That they are supporting a regime that will do anything to anyone.
Yes.
They rape people in prison. The footage is leaked, and then people go on the streets in Israel to protest and say we should have the right to rape people.
Yes.
This is this is who they are, and this is what the West supports. That's why no one anymore they should believe anything that the West says when it comes to Iran or the axis of resistance or Israel or Palestine or anything like that.
Professor, I really appreciate this conversation. I just want to nail you down on something very specific. You're pointing out that if Iran is threatened, the nuclear posture may change in a direct response to that threat. And I guess my thing is, it's being threatened. Israel will lose. And it seems like they're trying to create a context or justification, because that is the only thing that they have at their disposal that has potential to be, let's say, overtly destructive. So, as I always tell you, be safe. I appreciate these conversations. I really do. Thank you for it. And for the audience, Professor Mohammed Marandi, Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. Professor, you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for this.
You too, Jamal. Have a great day.
Thank you. Be safe. All right. We have come to the end. And we've come to the end. We have come to the end. Shout out to Professor Marandi. He has my deepest appreciation for joining me on the